implicit bias against women in medicine is prevalent, affecting their hiring, promotions, development and well-being, with the world at a standstill due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Newzroom Afrika celebrates women in medical science who are at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19.
The involvement of women in the field of medicine occurred in several early civilizations. The study of natural philosophy in ancient Greece was open to women, but gender roles became deterministic in the 18th century. During the 19th century, women were excluded from most formal scientific education, but they began to be admitted into learned societies during this period. In the late 19th century, the rise of the women's college provided jobs for female scientists and opportunities for education. Marie Curie, a physicist and chemist who conducted pioneering research on radioactive decay, was the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize in physics. She also became the first person to receive a second Nobel Prize in chemistry. Closer to home, the South African medical profession remains predominantly male, but to some degree this is changing. Women currently comprise at least half of all medical students at health sciences faculties in South Africa. Data supplied by the South African Medical Association indicates that in 2000, 47.1% of interns and 44.3% of community service doctors were women. According to data obtained from Medical and Dental Professional Board of the Health Professions Council of South Africa, women constituted 26% of registered doctors in this country in 2001. This compares with 17% in 1983 and 20% in 1994. Only 28.3% of registrars and 21% of specialists were women. 23% of these were specialists in hospital practice and 12.4% in private practice. This year, research shows roughly 40% of the medical workforce is female.
I have a long history because I'm old and semi-retired, so I've come a long way. I started off my life with a degree in mathematics and mathematical statistics, but I couldn't get a job. In those days, they didn't appoint, you could only teach or work for the defense force, and they didn't take women, or you could work for the CSIR. Those were the three choices I had. And when the CSIR said I had to write an IQ test first, because you never know, the women may be stupid.
I think it's been actually very easy for me as a woman because of the route that I've followed in terms of pathology. So of the disciplines in medicine, pathology is one of the ones that seems to be more amenable to female participation, and there's some very strong role models in pathology for women who have also come up through the route. So I was very lucky in the way that I started in pathology. The head of department where I did my training, Professor Wendy Stevens, is obviously a woman, and she is a superb scientist, and she's managed to draw to her department a large number of women scientists.
I started many years ago in the 80s as a medical technologist in the laboratory. So somebody who does all the testing, like COVID-19 testing, although we didn't do it then. And I then moved into the research science arena in the 90s and got my PhD through UCT and am now working at CPUT as an associate professor teaching new or young lab scientists to hopefully come through the ranks and take the lead in biological science.
I started off with engineering, but I found that medical science for me was a concept of being able to help people rather than do abstract work in a more mechanical way. And so I wasn't like actually at the time targeting microbiology. It was more a case of biological sciences. And then the lab that I moved into under the mentorship of another woman who's now Professor Mizrahi was tuberculosis, because of course tuberculosis is a big problem in South Africa.
The type of work that I do here at the CBTBR is mainly focused on looking at drug targets and exploring some of the genes that may be involved in virulence and pathogenesis of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is the causative agent of tuberculosis. And more recently, I've been involved in growing and harvesting the coronavirus.
Army told me straight out. I also had to write an IQ test for the Army, but they phoned me and said I did too well. I didn't know you could, but I did too well, so they didn't want me. And that was literally his words. I'm not lying to you. And so I decided I think maybe I should take another course, and I went on to epidemiology, which is the study of illnesses as it spreads in large groups of people. Went to take a degree in that, and then I did an honors, and then I did a master's, and then I did a doctorate in community health.
Having strong female role models has really made a huge difference in the way that we see ourselves as women in science. And I think that this particular institution and this particular department and division are particularly good at encouraging women to develop the confidence. So a lot of it is about mentorship and about creating an environment that's very nurturing for women in science. So in my current department, I think I have 2 males. Everybody else is female, so we're a women-heavy department. But you know, it's wonderful to see how that kind of environment is bolstering women's confidence to go out into the world and create science.
In the 80s, it was very difficult because most of the top academic positions were men. And in the medical science field, it was exactly like that as well. But I'd say today it's far easier, although we haven't attained, I think, the goal that we would like in the scientific field. If you look at academic positions today at major universities, and including my own, the top positions are still held by men. And women find it very difficult to penetrate that. And those that do, and there are many that do, they still, I sometimes find it difficult to be taken seriously.
Then when I did my postdoc, I actually worked here at the CBTBR, and that was the molecular microbiology unit at the time, and it was headed by Professor Valerie Mizrahi. And then working for a woman inspired me again, because when I came, she was, she had a young family, and yet she was doing good science, and she was, working very hard. And I think I got my inspiration from there to say that anything and everything is possible. It doesn't mean that, we have to have families, or we, have like young kids that we can't meet our goals and dreams.
For me personally, it was a case of ability, and moving up in science very often is guaranteed by merit. So from that point, if you have the skills, you have the possibilities of moving forward.
In science-related fields, women historically have been overlooked when it comes to receiving credit for their contributions. Reasons for gender disparities in the C-suite of medicine are many.
It has gotten easier. I also have to tell you, I think what helps is if you get older. So the two go hand in hand. The times moved on and I got older. So when you get a bit more senior, you have to, as a woman, you have to wait for your voice to carry. Because when you're young, they don't believe that you know or that you can see. So now that I've got older and I've got a lot of experience, because a lot of my ordinary community health research was in the dense settlements and in water pollution and how that spreads disease and so on. So once you've got a reputation that you can do good work and that you understand, together with you're getting more senior, your voice carries a lot more weight.
Another thing, and a criticism of women, is that they need to support their younger counterparts. I often speak to students, I'm in that field, and have contact with other scientists, and a common theme is that women who attain those levels don't seem to support the younger girls and women coming through. So, yes, we've come a long way since the 80s, but I think as women we could still attain more and make a bigger impact if we stuck together and worked together and support each other.
There are a number of things that do attract women to pathology. It requires a lot of consolidation and analysis, which women often find very attractive. It also is, less possibly requirements for physical strength. So some of the clinical disciplines require physical strength, like maybe orthopedics a little bit more. So I think there are a number of things that attract women to pathology per se. That's not to say that men aren't excellent pathologists as well, but certainly of the clinical departments and the pathology departments, a lot of us are women.
As a person coming into the field, if you're just interested, be it boy or girl, if the interest is there and the understanding you have is there, at the beginning your scientific growth is not really impeded, but at a later stage when you're moving up, a lot of politics comes into it, and that is a different issue per se. But beginning off, it is certainly quite exciting.
My parents were liberal. They placed a lot of emphasis on education. And coming from an Indian cultural background, things like marriage is very important, having to settle down. Education for girls was not a priority. Boys were always viewed as being, the career-minded or the money earners. But I must say I was very fortunate that my parents, gave us all the equal opportunities. And the only other challenge that I faced was, it was the apartheid times. Getting into university on its own was hard. Had to work very hard. But I think also having a background at home where education was priority made me set my goals very early, and I sort of knew that I wanted to get out of what my dad did. I didn't want to be in that same position.
For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Khotso Sillo.